Our correspondent Akshay Dongre joins us for more from the newsroom on this. Akshay, hi, good morning. When we talk of the ongoings in the West Asia crisis, then both the sides remain unabashed, while Iran says that it is completely into war. US has said that it is still not finished when it comes to the war. How do you see the conflict or the war ahead pan out with both sides unabashed?
Well, it's quite difficult to predict what's going to happen given the circumstances that have been observed in the last few months, especially given the fact that any and every statement that is coming from the top leaderships here is not held as far as actions are concerned, because we have seen the US president talk about peace. We have seen him talk about obliterating Iran. We have seen him also talking about the fact that the entire capability of Iranian military, the IRGC, have been demolished a couple of months back, and still the war continued, the conflict continued, and that perhaps is the reason why it's quite difficult to see that exactly what is going to happen. Many a times, even after the announcement of ceasefire, we saw attacks continue to happen. Then the statements changed completely. It was a U-turn from the ceasefire plan to complete obliteration once again of the Iranian forces. In many of the interviews and podcasts, even the Vice President of the United States has spoken about Israel also pushing the US to continue with the conflict, especially given the fact that the Israeli objectives of this conflict were far from being met when the ceasefire was announced. That was the regime change in Iran, the change of the government that is there in place right now. So the situation remains quite complicated and sensitive at this point, with the Strait of Hormuz once again coming under attack. Yemeni Houthis targeting the ports of Saudi Arabia, Bab el Mandab, including also along with all of these straits, the Omani corridor as well, which was considered relatively safer to travel to, but the IRGC continues to blockade that. The US armed forces and the US military that is present in the area has another stance altogether. So the situation is complicated. This seems to be now moving ahead in a sort of a war of attrition, because the military capability of Iran is not the problem here. US far outweighs the military capability of Iran, Houthi, and Hezbollah combined. But it is going to find it quite difficult to occupy the lands, to control who fires at ships from the Iranian borders, and that perhaps is the biggest threat to not the US forces there, but to the global shipping routes, the oil tankers that are coming from that region. And we have been reminding our viewers that about 20% of the global oil and gas reserves come from the Strait of Hormuz alone. And if the other straits, other corridors are also closed, it can reach up to 40%. So that is quite devastating effect, especially given the fact that most of the developing countries in South Asia, Southeast Asia, other parts of the world, in Africa as well, are dependent on this oil that is coming from this region. So it is going to wreak havoc as far as the economic front is concerned.
All right, that was about the economic burden on the world. But then, Akshay, to what extent can diplomacy still have a chance when we talk of a solution to this crisis, or has the war reached a point where de-escalation is very difficult?
Well, de-escalation is never ruled out. Diplomacy can never be ruled out, to be honest, in any war. No war in the history has continued indefinitely, and in the end, it is only diplomacy, dialogue, treaties that show a way out. So countries like India have always advocated for diplomacy to be given first chance. However, in this situation, like in many wars, we see it is guns that are speaking first and then the diplomats. So it is going to be quite difficult to see diplomacy right now with the strikes continuing for the last 11 days. But we can never rule that out.
All right, Akshay, we leave it here. Thank you so much for joining in with those inputs.